howdy, Joseph.
Hi, hello, how are you?
We heard the news,
We're quite enthused.
and the only thing to do
What should we do?
is strum this guitar
And sing to the stars.
and serenade you.
You survived, and that's true. I thought I'd send a little wish to you.
That is some mighty fine fiddling. But hey, let's pick it up.
All right.
That's more like it. Yeehaw!
Play it for Joseph.
All right, now where were we? Okay, you're still standing, and that's pretty great.
Joseph!
You know what? You kicked his butt. It's time to celebrate.
Joseph!
Birds will jingle jangle.
It's time to do-si-do.
So grab yourself a partner and let's see go.
Cause it's a
Jingle jangle here and a jingle jangle there. A jingle jangle inspiration everywhere. A jingle jangle here and a jingle jangle there.
a jingle jangle inspiration everywhere.
All right. That's how you celebrate.
Well, surprise, surprise, surprise. This is me, comedian George Wallace, the new Mr. Vegas. I'm here with you tonight. I'm famous. But let me tell you something. Your host tonight, Joseph Jaffe, he's not famous. He's not famous at all. But that's all we can do for you tonight. That's the best we can do. You know, Joseph is like Jon Stewart wannabe. He's like a Howard Stern wannabe. He is not famous, but he's your host, okay? Maybe he'll do good tonight. This is what you paid for. This is what you get. So, ladies and gentlemen, maybe you want to show him some love. Please welcome the not-so-famous Mr. Joseph Jaffe. Make some noise. Make some noise.
This is my best kind of show notes. We didn't touch one of them, not even one of them. I'm not sure which one is Paul Rudd and which one is Lane Green.
Final card here is the ultimate outcome.
Today is Take Your Dog to Work Day.
Like Scooby-Doo.
Without further ado, his debut.
Sweet Caroline.
Everybody say hello to Sammy. Is it not good?
I'm just pausing so that you just are at the front of your screen.
I'm so enormously flattered.
Brandon is not a bad blind date.
I'm gonna have to take a picture of this.
No, this is agape. This is love.
I really enjoyed this. You did do your homework. You asked great questions.
I'm flattered. Thank you. You just made my day.
Look at you! You are insane!
How did I do that?
You're
How did I do that?
insane! You're insane!
So I tried a little bit of play the music a little bit before and just roll into it, just vibe into it. How are you? How the hell are you? I myself survived. In fact, I think I'm going to play that intro every time one of these things happen. This is the latest and greatest. But this was the first one. And I'm not really sure what the hell the double line means. I understand there's a control and a test. But what does the double line mean? The best answer that I've received is I'm having twins. So maybe there was someone who looked at my girth and determined that I was having twins. You know, it's so great to look at these intros and to look back on this unbelievable journey, this amazing journey of where we can see how far we've come, but more importantly, how far yet we have to travel. That's the thing about a journey. And if you love the journey, if it's not a labor of love, but a love of labor, if you really love the process, then how can you fail, right? Today we're going to talk about creativity. We're going to talk about the creative process. We're going to talk about the accidental creative, not the accidental tourist, but the accidental creative. Mr. Todd Henry is in the house, and I get real excited when I talk about something that I'm so super passionate about. Now, I'm also passionate about the fact that the Jaffe coin is relaunching soon on a Solana blockchain near you, close to you. So expect lots of information overload from me as the tokenization of the creator economy continues to roll out. And we're going to be doing some pretty cool stuff with the show in 2023 using roles, using the token, using POAPs. And if you don't know what any of those mean, don't worry, just sit back and relax and just enjoy the Martian speak. Now, one thing that we do speak is in the Collective Cafe, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday in the Discord server, in Alpha Collective's Discord server. All you have to do is go to discord.gg/Alpha Collective, Monday through Friday, 8 to 9 Eastern. We have virtual coffee. We have real conversation. We are building real relationships. And I often say that it is the highlight of my day, other than obviously doing my show. And if you're curious, and why wouldn't you be, just come and swing by Monday through Friday, 8 to 9 Eastern Standard Time, and enjoy the conversation. One of the things we do is we talk about stuff, real stuff, cool stuff. For example, how would the business of Web3 affect, influence, transform, disrupt certain industries? And we just did an amazing conversation a couple of weeks ago in the airline industry. And in fact, we just did one this morning. Of course, we're in the metaverse now, so this morning could be any morning in your life, in any year. But we discussed the whole credit card, financial services industry too. It's just amazing. The mind boggles with possibilities. And so if you visit my LinkedIn, you can find me. I'm very findable. You can subscribe if you choose to my newsletter. Just under 2,000 people now have subscribed in a few weeks, which has been amazing. Very, very humbling. And you can get access to every Tuesday and every Thursday. I'm sharing highlights from the Seated Soliloquy, which takes place, as you know, my monologue, but also highlights from either the Collective Cafe or one of my guests. But now we will talk about the deleted, salacious, seated soliloquy. And in keeping with being able to connect to my guest, this one is called Organized Chaos. We think about the creative process, and we think about, what does it take to be creative? Are people naturally creative? Are you born creative? Or is it something that you can be taught? Is it something that you can be trained? Is it something you can train yourself on? I will tell you, my process, my creative process, is something that I call organized chaos, because it's not predictable, it's not linear, it's not systemized, it's not scientific, it's everything but. And yet there is a certain type of consistency and familiarity and predictability and even pragmatic dependability to the way that I create. I trust myself. I trust my gut. And I don't always know why, but I just do. It hasn't let me down yet, and I believe it will never let me down. When I came up with a book called Zero, I was like, hey, what if Zero was an acronym? What if it stood for, I don't know, zealots, entrepreneurship, retention, and owned assets? Now, then I thought about it, and I went back and I began to second guess, and I began to think, well, could the O stand for something else? And, maybe I couldn't think of anything with an O, so I went with owned assets, because actually that was an A. And what about, is there another Z word? Why zealots? And zealots became advocacy, and entrepreneurship became innovation, and retention was flip the funnel, which is what I'd written my previous book on. And the O of owned assets became what I believe was the biggest idea of the book, which is we can move from being tenants to landlords. Don't build your house on rented land. When you are a tenant, you pay rent to someone, but when you are a landlord, you can monetize your assets. You become an asset manager. Gee, what would happen if marketing moved from being a cost cutter or an expense to a revenue generator? A big idea that spun out of zero. In a perfect world, the optimal budget would be, or the optimal media budget would be zero. So I look back now and, I even used the example of Donald Trump as the classic zero paid media marketer. Zealots, right? I mean, love him or hate him, but you don't really have no opinion of him. Entrepreneurship, how he disintermediated the media using Twitter, retention, playing to that base, and owned asset, Trump Steak, Trump University, Trump Palace, Trump Universe, Trump playing cards. As I said, he was the only owned asset because nobody wanted to stand next to him. So the next time you encounter a spark, a piece of creativity, don't question it. Just go with it. Find your organized chaos. And now it's time for someone who is organized, but hopefully not chaotic. Or maybe he'll come on and say, I take offense to that. I'm very chaotic. Positioning himself as, and I love this might be the greatest description ever, as an arms dealer for the creative revolution. Viva Revolucion! Todd Henry teaches leaders and organizations how to establish practices that lead to everyday brilliance. He's the author of 6 books, including The Accidental Creative and Die Empty, which have been translated into more than a dozen languages, with more than 15 million downloads. His podcast, The Accidental Creative, has offered weekly tips for how to stay prolific, brilliant, and healthy since 2005. Mr. Todd Henry, welcome to the show.
It is so good to be here, Joseph. It's funny because I know your voice so well because, as I think I mentioned to you, I used to listen to your show so often, back in the day when there were fewer of us podcasters. And so it was almost like I was on a first name basis with people I'd never met before because you and a handful of others were just a common presence in my everyday life on my iPod. That's how long ago it was. So thank you for all the consistent work that you've been doing all these years and the way you've been serving the community for all these years.
I appreciate it so much. And if you like, we can actually we can play this out exactly as a podcast, which is we don't have to even look at each other because they tell me I have a face for radio anyway. I'm just kidding. Well, it's great to have an OG in the house. And you and I were discussing in the green room earlier about reminiscing about the good old days. I, by the way, have this moment, this memory. I was in San Diego for a conference. I think it was an iMedia conference. And I'm sitting on my hotel bed recording an episode of Across the Sound with Steve Rubell. We only did 13 episodes. We did the whole show. It was an amazing show. And then the file corrupted and we lost everything. And I just remember that devastation of thinking, I can't do it again. I can't have to emulate or try and think back to what I was saying. And I just wanted to give up there and then.
Yeah, I think we've all had those moments. I mean, there was a moment in 2007 when my business was nascent. So I'd been doing the podcast for a few years, but it really had only been a business for, maybe 6 to 8 months. And I did something really stupid because back then, as you know, we were hand coding XML files. I mean, the technology to produce a podcast wasn't quite mature yet. And so, we were doing all these crazy things to get the show out to people. It was kind of held together by, duct tape and baling wire at the time. And I did something that corrupted the database, completely corrupted my website database. And I had that exact moment. I came out of my home office. I sat on the the floor and I was talking with my wife and I said, I think I'm done. This is in 2007. I think I'm done. I can't do this again. I can't imagine going back and trying to rebuild everything and trying to make everything work again. And she looked at me and said, is that what you really want? And I sat there and paused for a minute. And I said, no, it's not. And I went back into my office and spent, I don't know, until like 3 a.m. or something, trying to rebuild everything. But I think everybody is entrepreneurs and we all have those moments, right? Where we question, should I be doing this? Is this really the right thing? And we're going to encounter those valleys, whether it's as an entrepreneur, as a creative pro. And I think it's in those moments we have to look deep inside of us and say, okay, what am I really trying to do here? What is the end goal? What's the outcome I'm committed to? And I think often that's the only thing that carries us forward is understanding that outcome that we're committed to.
Well, I love that kind of 1-2 punch. I think I'm done, followed by, is this what you really want? When we actually kind of introspect and we look deep and we ask ourselves, why are we doing this? What are we doing this for? Who are we doing this for? And that gives us the ability to keep going. We were discussing, and I said that I have this recurring regret, which is giving up the show. And what I said to you in the green room is, and I'm talking about my audio podcast, Jaffe Juice. I wish I could go back in time, and I wish I could be a fly on the wall to the moment, see the moment, the thought process when the decision was made, either explicitly or tacitly, to wind it down, to slow it down, to stop. I don't want to change the past because you can't change the past. I just want to know. That would give me so much peace just to know the moment that I essentially gave up, even if I didn't know I was giving up at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the thing that's interesting, and I work with a lot of leaders of organizations, and one of the things I tell them is we can make a really good decision that has maybe a bad or regrettable outcome in the end. The very reason why you gave up Jaffe Juice back in the day may have been a very good decision based upon what the information you had at the time. It may have been a decision that was founded in proper data and, given your other objectives and other things going on, maybe it was the right thing to do, even though it didn't maybe have the outcome that you wanted, or maybe you regret it now. And those regrets are, as you mentioned, Dan Pink in the green room, right? Those regrets can be a wonderful pointer to how we can shape and refine our intuition moving forward often. I am grateful that I didn't quit back then, because that was before my first book. That was before things really, took off for me. But maybe I think it was a good decision. Maybe it was not a good decision. Maybe I should have. Maybe, something completely different would have happened. We don't know often, but good decisions can lead to bad outcomes, and we have to live with that and just make the best decision we can at the time with our intuition.
Yeah, and I suppose bad decisions can lead to good outcomes.
Absolutely.
The corollary is true as well. I was thinking, Todd, if we go back and we look at the OGs and we actually audited them in terms of who didn't give up, how many of them have gone on to inevitable success and how many of them didn't, that are still going today, that are still, soldiering on and stumbling forward and haven't evolved. What do you think is the difference between the people? So we're almost looking at a subset, a universe of people that didn't give up.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference between the people that become successful and the people that don't?
Oh boy, that's the $1 million question, right? Because
Isn't
I
it,
think we can
though?
answer that. Yeah, because I think everybody would want to go emulate what they're doing. But I think the biggest part of it is, in my humble opinion, right, those who persist and continue to grow an audience are people who have a refined and unique voice, a refined and unique perspective. And they might be doing interviews with other people, but there's still a refined and unique perspective that they bring to the conversation. They're not just doing a cookie cutter interview with someone, asking all the same questions that everybody else asks about a book or something, but they have a specific audience that they're trying to connect with, and they're able to bring that unique voice and that unique perspective. Back in 2007, interview podcasts were not the norm. They were rare. When I invited Stephen Pressfield onto the Accidental Creative Podcast in 2007 to talk about the war of art, Stephen's last question to me after we did this wonderful interview, we had a great conversation. And at the very end, we were on Skype recording it. And I remember Stephen asked me, he said, Todd, can I ask you something before we go? And I said, sure. And he said, what's a podcast? Right? He didn't know. He just said yes to this thing. I mean, he didn't know what he was getting into, which is kind of cool. But it was pretty rare back then. And now, pretty much every show is an interview show, and that's kind of the thing. And so you have to have some perspective. You have to have a voice, something that sets you apart from everyone else. And I think those are the shows that resonate because they develop an audience, somebody who's attached to the host versus those that are kind of just emulating. I have this saying on the podcast. It's been the sign off since 2005, which is cover bands don't change the world, right? I come from a music background, and that was kind of the thing that I learned was you had people who would emulate other people who would just sort of copy other people, and they're fun to dance to or whatever, but they're not building a loyal following. People are there to hear the music, not to pay attention to the band. But if you have unique music, if you're doing something that's unique, that has its own sound, that has your own voice, then you're going to attract a following, a loyal following, maybe a small one at first, but that audience will grow over time.
Except the wedding singer, I suppose.
Right.
No, but so I just want to, I would take what you said, which was beautiful. And when you speak about refined and unique, so unique, absolutely. I heard an amazing interview with Roberto Blake, who actually I interviewed on the show just a couple weeks ago. And he talks about not so much niching down, but finding your niche. And it isn't just the subject matter, it's a unique take. So it's the uniqueness, it's the unique approach. I love the word refined. And I would just say it's not just refined, but it's ever refining. So that is a process too, just like the creative process. There has to be, and I've studied this a lot, which is you have to have staying power. So if I look at, if I ask you now today, 2022, all the way back to 2005, is it the same show, the same format, the same voice, the same authentic voice, or have things changed? And
things have definitely changed. But I would say the voice, the approach, the reason for being is the same, but the way that I accomplish that's very different, right? The tactical, the strategy is the same, but the tactics are very different.
Yeah, I like that as well. I mean, for me, this show was always about hope, positivity, and optimism. And if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing, which is get to know the human, get to know the person, hear their story, as we're doing right now, and as we're about to do in a segment called I Need Jeff Smith. Do you remember the Jeff Smith? I need him to create jingles for me again. But this is a segment called Fun Facts, where we actually say, well, we understand, we know the famous host of the podcast and six-time author. But what we didn't really know is the fact that, and let me just ask a question. In your 20s, you were a professional country music singer, but in fact, were you a cover band? Were you singing originals or were you covering? Maybe that's why you still aren't a professional country music singer.
So both. The answer is both. I made my living, which is what often happens, by playing bars and clubs and playing cover music, and that afforded me the ability to write music and go out and travel and tour with. And we got to open for Toby Keith and the Dixie Chicks and all kinds of amazing artists way back in the day. But I had to sort of make bank, if you will, playing piano bars and doing whatever I could to make a living as a musician in between. So all the fun stuff, the big stages didn't really pay very well. So I had to sort of fill that in with the cover band stuff.
I thought, by the way, you were amazing in A Star Is Born with Lady Gaga, by the way, just, personally, Oscar worthy. So what else did we find out about you? We found out that you're quite a genius. As a kid, you tried to make a helicopter out of a lawn mower engine and a Rudy Rod laser in your garage. I don't even know what a Rudy Rod laser is. A laser. So what happened, by the way?
So I grew up in a very rural.
Who did you kill?
No one, fortunately, no one. But I grew up in a really rural environment, so there wasn't a lot to do. So we had to just experiment with whatever we had on hand. And so we would take apart lawnmowers. We would do all kinds of crazy things. We thought, hey, a lawnmower has an engine. How cool would it be if we could build a helicopter? I mean, we didn't understand torque, and we didn't understand that the lawnmower engine wasn't actually going to lift us off the ground. But, we thought, hey, how cool would it be if we could actually just use this to build a helicopter, right? And so we did propellers and the whole deal. And we built like a structure for the lawnmower. And then, of course, the propeller went, where, and we're like, okay, this isn't going to work. But we did all kinds of crazy stuff like that. We tried to build a ruby rod laser. I guarantee you, I would be on some kind of NSA watch list if we tried to do this today, because the chemicals that we ordered from Frey Scientific would probably for certain make me look like a young terrorist at the time. But we bought test tubes and chemicals and tried to build a ruby that we could use to build a laser. I mean, we did all kinds of crazy things, but it was really fun, and we had a blast and learned a lot. And I'm really great. It's funny. I'm really grateful for growing up in, I guess you could say, the middle of nowhere. I'm really grateful that we had all of that freedom to just explore and play and experiment and try things, because honestly, there was nothing else to do. And so we had nothing to lean on but our own creativity, our own imagination, which was a lot of fun.
Okay, I have so many follow-up questions on that great insight. But first of all, by the way, did you know, I just saw this the other day, that in The Wizard of Oz, the snow in The Wizard of Oz in the movie was pure asbestos?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I had no idea. Wow.
So,
that's crazy.
Todd, I don't think we're in Kansas anymore. It looks like we might be in a hospital. Yeah, well, we live and we come from, and our parents come from a different time when they smoked, they drank, they did drugs. And look how we turn out. Wait, maybe that's not a good thing, but whatever. But I want to go back to, and actually before I go back there, I was talking about getting someone on the show. And they said, so what do you want to talk about? What do you talk about? So I said, what do you want to talk about? It's like, it's not about what I want to talk about. What do you want to talk about? And they responded by going, lazy. And then they responded by going, that's a lazy approach. That's not how podcasts are run. And I said, well, to be honest with you, I think that's a little flippant and insulting. And because I put a lot of work into the show, but actually what it is a real conversation with active listening going on. And so I don't prepare any questions. Why? You saw Saul Colt like in the beginning. It's like me tearing up my show notes, because based on what you say is going to determine if I'm listening, what I'm going to say back to you. And that to me is a powerful conversation. I don't know if you want to comment on that, but I just had to like share that moment.
No, I think you're exactly right. I think the having done the pre-work for the show today, I know that there's some preparation that goes into the show, right?
Hours and hours of it, right?
Yes, right. But I would say, you talked about organized chaos at the beginning, and I think that's really
true.
Probably the best phrase to describe how this show goes. We want to have enough structure to keep things on the rails, but enough freedom within that. When I talk to leaders about leading creative people, I say what you're aiming for is bounded autonomy, freedom within limits. So you want to have enough structure to guide and direct their energy, guide and direct their focus, ensure that they're moving in the right direction, but enough autonomy within that to create something interesting, to come to their own conclusions. I feel like that's kind of what you're doing with the show. It's not.
I mean, you nailed it. You absolutely nailed it. The thing that I've been saying of late is that I don't care. Forget about think outside the box. I don't care about thinking outside the box. Just let me act freely inside the box. I don't care how narrow the box is or how restricted the box is. I don't care. But just give me and empower me the ability to act as I can and will and have the ability to inside the box. And I think that's exactly what you just said.
I agree. The great filmmaker Orson Welles once said, the absence of limitation is the enemy of art. And I believe that is maybe the most succinct and profound way to describe it, which is great artists, great creative pros, great thinkers need boundaries within which to think. They need boxes within which to think. And this myth, this misnomer that complete freedom is necessary for creativity. If I only had complete freedom, I could do something really great. No, that's the antithesis of creativity. Creativity is working within your constraints and innovating within your constraints and figuring out a way. Sometimes that means reaching outside of those constraints because you're too constrained, right? But usually it's working within your circumstances and reaching for that, as Stephen Johnson eloquently put it, borrowing from evolutionary biology, reaching for the adjacent possible and playing with ideas and staying very close to that box, but maybe reaching slightly outside of it. That's where brilliant breakthroughs come from. They're not giant leaps into the unknown. They're usually incremental until something suddenly snaps into place.
Yeah, you went from the applause to the air horn as well. I didn't have this with my cast blaster back. Remember the cast blaster?
Yes,
Or as I
yeah.
used to say, cast blaster, which actually
Yes.
sounds very weird as a South African. I think that was just amazing what you just spoke about, and I encountered that when I worked in the agency world, which is I was surprised at how much creatives craved the data. They loved the research and the data and the insights. I was an account planner. They loved it. The more I could feed them with, the easier their job became, or at least the more empowered they were to just be able to just knock it out the park, because they didn't have, just like go crazy, go wild, let's go crazy. They actually had just enough structure to be unstructured, I suppose.
Yeah, and but one of the core reasons for that, having spent a lot of time with creative pros and in that world, in agency world, right? One of the core reasons is, what is the thing that creative professionals are most allergic to? Wasted work. They do not want to spend hours and hours pouring themselves into something, putting emotional labor. Lewis Hyde calls it emotional labor, discretionary energy into something, only to have somebody swoop in 2 weeks later and say, not really that. Let's do something different. And so that's why having that groundwork from the beginning, making sure that you have all the data and you understand specifically and clearly what it is you're trying to do is so important, because it prevents you from having to do all of the rework that often happens when people either aren't aware or they're not being diligent at the beginning of a project.
I can't work out whether your 7th book is going to be called Wasted Work or Bounded Autonomy. But I love these. It's gold, Jerry. It's gold. So I want to go back to the insight of growing up in the middle of nowhere, because there's a time and a place, right? The place was the middle of nowhere, nothing else to do but to imagine, to dream, to create. But the time was a time when we didn't have mobile phones and smartphones and all this, and Netflix and all this distraction out there. There's no question. I mean, when we go back and we understand the creative process, why do people have these ideas in the middle of the night, in the shower, on a walk, etc., when their mind is empty? So there is so much wealth and richness in that insight. But there's also another one that actually says necessity is the mother of invention, that when you don't have much to create with, you find whatever you have, the tools that are at your disposal, and you make the most. As they say, play with the cards that you were dealt. How do we emulate that or recreate that today in 2023 now, where, just looking at the Super Bowl, for example, as I still call it, the stupid bowl, right now, we're just, the only thing we see are celebrities getting sued for hawking crypto.
Right. Yeah. Well, that I think kind of speaks to the core problem, which is that often, our minds are not wired to absorb and process the amount of stimulus that is currently being thrust at them every single day. We're just not. And so the net result is either our minds adapt by thinking in a more shallow way about what we're experiencing, out of self-defense. We can't possibly process, right? Or we have to be mindful. We have to be diligent and disciplined about carving off time to be off the grid, carving out time to think deeply, I would rather personally, and this is the time of year when everybody posts about how many books they read during the year. I read 172 books, or whatever it is. I would rather read 4 books very deeply and think in unique and profound ways about how those insights apply to my life than just absorb 174 books and think about it very shallowly and I move on and it doesn't affect my life at all, right? Similarly, we need to carve out some time to reroot ourselves in our humanity. Our technology is outstripping our biological adaptation to that technology. We're not wired to be able to process all of this data that's coming at us every day. And it's a gift. It's a gift that we are so connected. But they're just like any gift, right? There's also a curse that accompanies it. There's a shadow side to every bright light. And part of the shadow side is that many of us are just shutting our brains off. I've been working with a lot of agencies lately, and they'll ask me questions like, what do I do when people just basically mindlessly surf Pinterest all day looking for inspiration? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, that's a real problem, right? We have to train ourselves to seek inspiration broadly and deeply, not just, in the expected places. And a big part of that is having some discipline, having some time carved out to do just that, to stop and to think and to study and to seek inspiration, but to do it in a way that allows us to be disconnected from the chaos of the world.
There, there is something really important. The other day, I did my seated soliloquy, and it was called Keep the Faith. And it was really a message, a motivational message of hope for people wading through the crypto winter and the bear market, etc. And the entire soliloquy monologue was written by an AI chatbot. And I finished the whole soliloquy and I delivered it with passion and with emotion. And then at the end, I said, and by the way, that entire thing was written by an AI chatbot. What a fraud, basically. I didn't feel fulfilled. I felt like a thief. And but still, like now you have all these agencies and all these clients coming out there and saying, what a great way for us to cut costs and write our copy using this. And something will die in that process. Even if there may be short-term gain, but there will be long-term pain. Now, I'm going to ask you to support that statement, which is it's all very well me being the idealist, the purist, to say that it's going to come at a price, and someone may be, well, yeah, the price will be low cost. So what do you say to those people that go, this is the future?
Well, I would
there was
ask
a lot in that too.
No, there is, and I think again, this is one of those moments, these unique moments in time where you have a technology and we have to decide how are we going to use this technology. Technology itself is neutral. Technology isn't good or bad. It depends on how we use that technology, right? Sure. We can use nuclear technology to power the world, or we can use it to build bombs to destroy people. And so I think the question here, and the thing I'm most interested in, is how we use this technology to enhance our creativity, not to replace our creativity, or do we use it as a shortcut to a destination, and in so doing, basically short circuit our unique humanity? I think back to the global financial crisis of the late 2000s, and a lot of organizations that I was encountering were basically stripping their innovation pipeline. They were cutting investment in innovation in order to shore up next quarter's numbers. And so what they would do, is basically make the bottom line look fine for their investors, for their stakeholders, while simultaneously kneecapping their future. Well, what happened 7, 8, 10 years after that? They had no innovation pipeline, and eventually they paid the price for having cut all of those initiatives, all of those investments. I feel like this has the potential to do the same thing. We are going to strip all of the creative out of our organizations and replace it with artificial intelligence. And it's going to work fine for a while because we're going to cut costs. And then what's going to happen down the road? What's going to happen to our organizations down the road? We have to be making investments in the future. And so I think AI as augmented assisted creativity is a beautiful tool. It might spark things that I never would have thought of otherwise if I were just writing this, because it allows me to almost access another brain outside of myself. As a complementary source, beautiful. As a replacement, I think that that's a step too far. I think that everything's going to start to feel derivative after a while. I mean, how can it not feel derivative after a while,
Well,
right?
also because as I was playing around with the chatbot, I was saying write a soliloquy, from the voice of Chuck Norris, or talk about the trends, and constantly the bot says, I can't think ahead, I can't tell you about tomorrow, I can only tell you what's happened in the past. And that's just one component, right? Speaking of derivative work, going back to Walt Disney, who said, if you can dream it, you can do it. So the other thing that strikes me is maybe we need to reclaim or rebrand AI instead of first of all, it's staring at us in the face. Artificial. It's artificial. It's not real. It's not actually intelligent. So if it was augmented intelligence or assisted intelligence, why not just reclaim and realize, as you say, this is about a sidekick as opposed to ceding all of our power to the machine.
Right. And you said something really interesting that I would like to also go back to and poke at a little bit. You said it was not very gratifying for you to deliver this soliloquy, even no matter how passionately you delivered it. And maybe you agreed with some of the sentiments. It wasn't gratifying. And that's because as human beings, we're wired to derive a sense of identity, of value, of gratification from the work that we do. And if there's no connected why behind the work that we do, if there's nothing driving that, if we can't see a bit of ourselves in that work, it's not very gratifying. It's going to feel hollow. You can succeed your way into failure. So you can get all the right results, but in the end, net sum, you failed because it had nothing to do with you. And you know that deep down. Yes, you can claim the result because the AI wrote a great soliloquy, but you didn't feel gratified because you can't take pride in work that was done by an algorithm. So I think there's a deeper question here, which is, why? What's the net of this? I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, as human beings, again, we're wired to derive a sense of identity and purpose and meaning from the value we put in the world. We are not our work, but we put a piece of ourselves into our work. Our intuition is on display, right? We're saying, here's what I think, here's what I value when we create something. And I feel like we're just carving out, we're hollowing out humanity and essentially reducing it to an algorithm and saying, really, at the end of the day, let's take all the soul out of it and let's just reduce it to an algorithm. I think that is, listen, it might be good for business, might be good for the bottom line. I think net, it's bad for humanity unless we treat it as another tool in the same way that we would treat any research tool, right? To help us, to spark us into thinking in new ways. Then I think it could be immensely valuable.
I mean, you get a second air horn for that. That was even a better soliloquy, and you were seated. So it dawns me as we're having this amazing conversation that began asynchronously in 2005, that this may be the first time in 420 interviews that we don't even get to beyond the fun facts, which is a testament and a tribute to my laziness and also to you and your amazing insights. Seriously, I'm already saying this is one of my favorite shows. Normally I say that my latest guest is the best guest yet, but this time I actually mean it. One of the things that we were going to talk about, but I'll bring it back to this part of the conversation, is why creative courage is often lacking in the workplace. And specifically, what I want to draw back to is this idea of paying the price. The reason why we make these decisions short term is because we know that we're not actually going to be around in the company when the company pays the price. And that to me is that is treason. That is corporate treason. That is treachery. That is literally poisoning the very well that you drink from. And I don't know whether that is necessarily the same concept as creative courage. But I would love for you to either comment on that or even just go back to this idea of, Because isn't creative courage also the ability to say, no, I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to do it this way. Not because I'm a purist, not because I want to go back to, Ohio, where in the middle of nowhere, where, or the asbestos filled fields of Kansas, but because it's the right way to do, and longer term. It's like when a parent says to a child, one day you will realize, one day you will see.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I define, so I believe courage is a resource, but I believe bravery is the habit. And this is actually tied to the book that I'm writing right now. I believe bravery is a habit we can develop, bravery in the face of uncertainty. As creative pros, we confront uncertainty all day long. That's what we do. That's what we're paid to do, is to confront uncertainty. And the biggest part of that is making decisions in the face of uncertainty. The root of the word decision is the word cis, which means to cut. It's the same root as the word scissors, right? Or any number of other words that have CIS in them. To decide means to cut off other options. And we don't like to do that. And the reason is, to your point, that we know that the decision is going to put us on the line, whereas abdicating a decision is going to push the accountability down the road. We know that if I just can wait it out long enough, I don't really need to make a decision. I don't really need to act bravely, because someone else is going to pay the price later, and I can come out looking good, which comes back to this question that we asked earlier. What am I really trying to do here? I believe that bravery is doing the right thing, even in the face of fear and personal cost. It's a matter of integrity. It's a matter of, am I willing to live with my decision? Am I able to live with my decision, live with myself? Or am I just trying to get to the next thing, the next promotion, the next gig, the next whatever? And so, at the end of the day, again, to get back to this sort of tie it back to the humanity angle, we're building a body of work every day through everything we do, through every decision we make, every place we put our focus, our time, our energy. And we have to live with that body of work. We have to point to it and ask, does that represent what I was capable of, or does that represent the sum of my greatest compromises? And I believe that the reason creative courage is often lacking in the workplace is because we have people who aren't willing to make the decision they know they need to make, because they're afraid of paying the consequences. And that gets back to this question of, what am I really trying to do? What do I really care about? What outcome am I committed to? And I think the more we root ourselves in that desired outcome, the more consistently we can make brave decisions under pressure.
I want to work backwards with just a few of the books, because your new book is called Daily Creative. Find your inspiration to spark creative energy and fight burnout. And I want to talk about this idea of atomic habits, and this idea of getting into routine. And essentially, the key word here is, there's energy and there's burnout. We're at a time, we're in a place where people are burning out at record rates and paces. I have a friend, Brian Fanzo. Fanzo, after creating a podcast every single day for a year and buying an NFT every single day for a year, he's now decided to, I think, launch a piece of AI art every single day. For him, with someone with ADHD, the daily habit, the atomic habit, has actually prevented him from burning out and has almost been counterintuitive. It has kept him on the track and honest. I would love to hear your take on, what does it take for us to just keep these, keep the fires, the creative fires burning, not give up, not give in, and just keep going and build this momentum and passion.
So Gretchen Rubin once very eloquently said, what you do every day matters more than what you do once in a while. And I believe that to be true. I think that our daily infrastructure, the systems that we build into our life, the practices, the rituals, are what support our ambitions. We have great ambition often without being willing to build the infrastructure necessary to bring that ambition into the world. And so I go back to people like, our mutual friend Seth Godin, who back in 2002 or 2001 said, I'm going to write a blog post every single day, right? And has done that every single day since 2001 as an act of service to the world. Or Brian Fanzo, who I love. I think he's just great at what he does. And the idea of every day I'm going to do this thing. It's the disciplines, the regular structure that we build into our life that supports our ambition. So many people want to, I call it, and Die Empty, I wrote about what I called stretch, sprint, and step goals. You can have a big goal. That's great, wonderful. Like, for example, I'm writing a book right now, right? For a lot of people, that would seem like a really daunting thing, write a book. But for me, I know that the book is just a series of sprints, and you do too, right? That you have a series of sprints that allow you to eventually come up with a book. Well, that series of sprints is just a series of steps. So for me, that looks like 500 words a day, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I take Saturday, Sunday off to punctuate that rhythm. I know I'm going to write a chapter every 2 weeks. That's 2 chapters a month. That's a draft in like 6 months. But to somebody just saying, I'm going to write a book, that feels very overwhelming. It's the things we do every single day, those steps that lead us to that eventual outcome. And so what you do every day matters more than great acts of the will. And that's what Daily Creative was about. It was about basically building a daily practice around your creativity.
I have to tell you that when it comes to the concept of dying empty, this resonates so strongly with me. And in fact, now I'm writing my 6th book and you're writing your 7th book. So it's like, it appears that you're always going to be one book ahead of me. foiled again.
You're onto my secret plot. I've been working for years to stay one book ahead of you. So
I know, and it's like it's driving me crazy now. It feels like Scooby-Doo. I thought I'd gotten away with it, but you pesky kids. But the one thing that I've actually said in the new book is that the business model of life is broken. And I talk about hoarding money and hoarding status and hoarding everything. And then when we die with all this money and therefore all these unfulfilled opportunities and moments and experiences. And we either leave them to a bunch of ungrateful, squabbling, self-entitled children or a cat. And so I actually said, in a perfect world, we would die with $1 to our name, because that would represent the perfect life well lived. And so that's why, for me, there's tremendous concept of, you should die every night, because actually spiritually you do die every night and you come back again with another chance to get it right. Every day you should die empty, and certainly in a career and in a life, we should die knowing that there literally was nothing left. So I look at it very literally.
Yeah, and I meant it very literally in the book. So many people push things into the future. And listen, you can't do everything. And I hope I die with more ambitions and hopes and dreams than I had the day before. I mean, this isn't about accomplishing everything you ever wanted to do. It's about living with a mindset of, am I hoarding anything? As you said, am I hoarding anything inside of me? Is there a conversation I should be having that I'm not? Is there work I should be putting into the world that I'm not? Is there anything I'm not doing to develop my relationships or to build into the people that I care about? That's really what it's more about. To your story, very quickly, my father-in-law once gave my wife a $1 bill and sort of was joking. And she said, "What's this?" And he said, "On the day I die, a man is going to show up at your door and knock on the door, and he's going to take that $1 back from you. And that's going to be the last $1 that he's like, I'm going to go skidding into my grave, bouncing my last check. So just, hold on to that $1 because somebody's going to come claim it." And I love that. I love that idea that
it's going into the book. That story now, I'm making a note of it, is going into the book.
That's funny.
So it's so true, but it's also very it's also very like, who is the man, and is he holding a sickle?
Well, it is, but listen, death is a great motivator, right? I mean, the reality is, my friend Brian loves to say, the death rate's hovering right around 100%. That's the one doorway that we're all going to walk through at some point, but we prefer to ignore it. We prefer to pretend like it doesn't exist, like we have infinite amounts of time. But reality is, today is the only day we have. It is. And not to sound too self-helpish, I don't think that's a self-help concept. I think that's a reality that we should live with as creative pros, as human beings, that today is the only opportunity I have. I can't do anything about yesterday, and I can't do anything about tomorrow today. I can make investments hoping I get to live tomorrow, but I can't do anything about that. All I can control is what I do today.
That comes back to Bob Garfield saying 50% of the population is dumber than the other half. And if you're wondering about that statistic, I know exactly which half you're in. So I'm thinking like the death rate is hovering at almost 100%. I'm like, it's like
Well, that's the right, exactly.
99% of all short putts never go in the hole,
Right.
except Tiger
Exactly.
Woods's. So
That's funny.
let's go to the concept and what I started thinking about, which is the process of creativity and trusting yourself and trusting your gut in a time when there is so much volatility and uncertainty. And let's even take it one step further. Cancel culture, where we say the wrong thing at the wrong time, we show a bit of vulnerability, and we could in fact be crushed. And I actually found a quote. This is the quote that I found for you. Really like trying to like go a little bit deeper on the whole concept of accidents. They're funny things, accidents. You never have them till you're having them. And that was A.A. Milne. And I thought to myself, the process of being being accidentally creative, the process of being, what did you call it? Unbounded. What was the unbounded autonomy, or having enough structure to be unstructured. And yet probably the thing that takes us over the edge is the ability to just demonstrate that courage, that bravery, to trust ourselves, trust our gut, and sometimes do the hardest thing, even if it comes at a price. And I would love, in the time we have left, for you to talk about the accidental, the spontaneity of creativity.
Yeah, and this book really was sourced in my experience leading really talented creative people and observing that those who continue to produce day after day, this phrase create on demand came from the book, that were able to basically create on demand every day when they had a project that they had to deliver on, were people who had some structure in their life, some regular wells that they went back to, some habits that they had developed that kept them in a place of viability. They had a regular routine that they followed every single day, and where they got their work done, but they also had a regular routine of inspiring themselves in some unique ways, or of how they thought about the work, how they defined the work for themselves. And so as I began to notice those patterns over time, I began to do some research into the psychological principles behind them, and the accidental creative, the whole point of that book. Because people think I'm saying like, wacky, accidental, go out and shoot Nerf guns. And that's not the point. The point of the book is structuring dangerous intersections in your life where creative accidents are likely to occur. Right? It doesn't mean they will, but you're creating these environments within which things are going to smash together, and you're going to eventually have that breakthrough moment. Because creativity, as Steve Jobs once famously quipped, is just connecting things. It's connecting dots. Well, in order to do that, you need high quality dots to connect, and you need to have the bandwidth, the attentional bandwidth, to be able to notice when those dots are actually smashing into one another. So the whole point of the book, The Accidental Creative, is to identify some of the reasons why we get stuck creatively, and then to talk about some practices that can create those dangerous intersections. Things like how we define our work. If you don't know what you're looking for, you're not going to find it. And so how you define the problems you're solving is really important. Relationships. Many of us treat our relationships with happenstance, but are you building purposeful relationships in your life? Are you managing your energy? Or are you becoming overwhelmed by meaningless tasks? Are you managing the stimuli in your life? Are you using your hours for effective activity, not just efficient activity? Are you investing your time, not just spending it? So these are just a couple of the things that help us create those dangerous intersections where creative accidents are more likely to occur.
Give me a quick example of very practically and tactically what a dangerous intersection could look like.
Yeah. So, many of us have probably been in a meeting before where a lot of ideas are being thrown out, right? And you hear something thrown out in that meeting that seems completely innocuous and irrelevant to everybody else. But you, for example, have just read an article in a magazine that tied to another thought that you had been journaling about recently. And you realize, wait a minute, there's actually something here. There's something that we could combine this thing that you just threw out. It's not perfect on its own. Everybody else thinks it's irrelevant. But if I combine this with this other thing that we've been working on, or this idea that we had once upon a time, and we combine those things together, they actually form something really unique that could be the breakthrough that we're looking for. That's an example of a creative accident. It's when multiple things come together to form something better than themselves. And so that's really kind of the.
And it's almost like embracing the tangent and the non sequitur, which I think we probably did very well today in this very lazy podcast. I told you we didn't even get to the end, which of course the third and final piece of the puzzle, which everyone wanted to know. You're looking and going, wait, I don't know exactly what that is. And of course, we would be talking about Bach. Your most played Spotify artist of 2022 was Bach. I'm
not Sebastian Bach. Not Sebastian Bach.
I figured it was the other one, but not on purpose. Well, listen, if you want to understand this part, I'm not going to tell you. You're just going to have to go and connect with this brilliant, brilliant human being. And one of the best possibilities that you have is actually you can hear him in your ear holes, as Fanzo would say. Subscribe to the Daily Creative podcast at toddhenry.com/Daily Creative. Buy one of his, buy all 6 of his books, damn it. Have you not seen enough? Have you not heard enough? Follow Todd on the Insta, follow him on the Twitter, and remember that he is the arms dealer with a conscience, with integrity and with soul, for the creative revolution. I think we're going to be fine with you at the helm, Mr. Todd Henry. It was a pleasure after all these years to do it like this. And who knows, I might even make a guest appearance on your show. We hear rumors.
I think there's a good possibility of that, yes.
And of course, we also hear, again, we cannot confirm nor deny that Chuck Norris himself, he may not be part of an AI chatbot, but he is definitely a subscriber to your podcast.
Thank you for
actually, that's what I
meant. You are Chuck Norris approved.
That was an accident, but you know what? Who the hell was perfect? Take everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching the show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing with your host, multiple author, and global keynote speaker, Joseph Jaffe. If you like the show, tell a friend or two. Please subscribe to the show, and if you want to get inside news, previews of upcoming guests, and much more, visit josephjaffe.com/subscribe to sign up for the show's newsletter.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.